Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hope That Hopes podcast. I am Camille.
And I'm Ramsey. Today we're talking about education, but before we get started, can we just note that Camille and I are matching yet again in the studio? Never planned, but
we always show up.
Always matching. We have literally the same cardigan on. If you're not watching with us and you're listening, we showed up with the same cardigan on this morning, and we frequently show up almost head to toe matching. It's embarrassing, but what's new? I guess we're just becoming such good friends that it's an unspoken, thing. Maybe we're just here too much.
Probably.
Recording for all of you. But today we're talking about education. And I think this is a topic where we have had a lot of maybe struggle and also success in talking about foster parenting and helping our kiddos with school and making sure that we give them all of the educational opportunities that they deserve as kids. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, about some of the hurdles, kind of what we've gone through, and maybe a little bit of advice on how to start this journey with your kids if you have a new kiddo in your home, or if you're a new parent like us, how to, kind of survive in this world of education.
Yeah, I think you helped me a lot whenever we were going through the initial process of, getting Maymay into school and everything, because you had some experiences that were not so great. And then also, and it's a learning process. Like, hindsight, you're thankful that you learned those things right, but it's hard in the moment for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when I talk about it, people are like, what kind of struggles could you possibly have? Like, surely you just put your kid in school and it's easy. Well, not so much, especially when we're talking about some things that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, trauma behaviors and things like that. Maybe they haven't been in an educational environment before. That was true for one of my kiddos. And then, again, we talked about last week, I think, on the teenager episode, how graduation rates are far lower, how school can sometimes be a triggering place. For some people, it could be a safe place. Mm-hmm. So some kids maybe put all their energy just into school, while other kids are triggered and don't want anything to do with school or the relationships there. And so, I think it's maybe a little bit more complicated than people might think at first on the outside.
Well, and it all just depends on if you're going to be changing schools. Obviously, it's not ideal to change schools, kind of like you were saying. Hopefully, that can be a safe space where your child doesn't have to move around, but that's not always the case. If you live further away from the school that they came from, then, you also need to consider what you're able to do, because ultimately, like we've talked about before, what you're able to do is going to help them in the long run. So switching schools can be really hard. I mean, being totally pulled out of your environment altogether is a lot to take in.
Yeah, and it's a balance between safety concerns as well. Like, there may be safety concerns for your children. Like, if people from, their life know where they go to school and have access to them there, they may need to move. And so it's a hard balance between, like, again, removal causes so much trauma, and part of that removal is typically, like you said, not always, but typically from school as well. Mm-hmm. And that's taking you out of your environment with your friends, with your teachers, maybe with the only trusted adults your kids have ever really been around. And so, it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, you had to change schools how many times?
Yeah. So with one of my kiddos, when they first came to my home, we had to change a couple of different times. We ended up finishing the year out at the original school. And then when we started the next year, I didn't know anything about parenting when I started this. And one of those things is registering for school. I remember I kind of expected DCFS to do that.
Yeah.
Because they want control over a lot of things. But this was an area where they were just like, put them in school. Mm-hmm. Good luck. And I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to do that. Who do I call? Do I send an email? Do I fill out a form? I had truly no idea, which maybe sounds silly to some of you, but if you've never done it before, you're like, okay. And so I was under the impression that we just needed to go where we were districted for, where we lived. And so I registered them in school where we live. And That school did not end up working out. I realized that we could have just gone back to the original school, which wasn't too far from us. But I kind of was just left a little bit without much assistance in that area. I'm sure if I would have asked my caseworker, she would have helped me. But I guess I just assumed what I had to do instead of like asking maybe more questions and talking to the school more. And, I got my first placement like right before the summer. So we had spent all summer together. It was really fun. And I did not anticipate that we would have any struggles in school. I didn't anticipate behavioral struggles. I didn't anticipate academic struggles. And I think when we got to that first school year, it was a lot because I wasn't anticipating maybe what we would see, and the school wasn't either.
Right.
And so we went in a little bit blind to how that might go. And so, because of a result of that and how the school handled some things, we ended up having to switch multiple times until we found our current school, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But we've done quite a bit of of moving over the years. And I think that's probably just due to, the district we were in basically said they didn't have the resources to help us. And I was really disappointed to hear that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, what do you mean you don't have the resources to help us? Like, we're a family in your district. I feel like you should find the resources. I don't know. I think for me, I was just a little bit taken aback maybe with how unprepared a lot of districts, a lot of teachers, a lot of administration were in handling kids who have experienced trauma.
Which is interesting because I feel like when you're dealing with kids and families, I mean, I know obviously like being trauma informed is more of a hot topic right now in the last, decade or however long. But I feel like that should be something that people consider, with families, especially mixed families. And, I just feel like you're dealing with so many different types of people that should be something you consider. So it is very interesting and surprising that, certain schools aren't equipped in that way. Yeah. And it's sad.
I kind of learned what questions to ask and how to fight a lot. I mean, education has been a fight for us, quite truly. Like, it has been probably one of my biggest places of advocacy. I ended up somehow through our somewhat horrible experience in a state board of education meeting, which was not something that I anticipated. But these bigger conversations were had about, hey, how do these districts, especially these public school districts, get the resources that they need to do what they need to do in order to take care of these children? That was a big hot topic. Now, we didn't end up staying in the district because they didn't have those things in place at that time. But I hope through our struggle that, and I won't get into specifics. I could, but I don't think that's fair to my child. I think that should be private. But through the course of several months, just wasn't a good fit. Like I said, the resources weren't there. But hopefully these conversations spurred them on to make some change in their district. I really hope that for them, but I can't guarantee that today it's like that. And so, after a long time, and I know you dealt with this too, we kind of went school shopping a little bit.
Yep.
What was the process for you of school shopping and trying to figure out maybe what fits your child and their needs best?
Initially, we were looking for a school once Mamie came to us because she was coming out of the surrounding area that we live in. And so, we were just trying to make the best decision we knew how. However, at the time, her caseworker was not, she was like out on leave. And so she couldn't really advise us in that way what might be best. And so we were just going off of what schools we had heard were really great. And so we chose a school that was outside of our district. So it was like a process even getting into that school because we had to advocate for her to be outside of our district. And so that was a long process in the first place, and then ended up not being a good fit, unfortunately. It's a really big school, really big high school, and it was just too much. And so, we wanted Mamie to feel as comfortable as she could. Obviously, changing schools at all is going to be a big deal. And so, because of the time of the semester, we were like, well, we got Mamie in October. We reassessed in the spring semester and decided on a new school, which ended up being the same school.
Same district as me.
Yeah, same school that Ramsey's kids go to. Obviously, high school versus elementary. But yeah, so I think that we kind of left it up to her at that point.
Yeah.
Obviously, she didn't know a ton about these schools because she's not from the immediate area that we're in. And so she had only heard certain things. But we did kind of give her options as far as, hey, this school's a little bit smaller. This is a charter school. This is a private school that maybe we could look at. There's different opportunities that we have that she could have potentially gone to a private school. So we were just looking at all the options and ended up on, the smaller school. And yes, it's still a hard thing to go to a new school, but I think overall it's been a better experience because it's way less intimidating to walk into a smaller school and, not just be bombarded with literally chaos.
Yeah, I think it's just hard to be the new kid too. I ended up being the new kid in middle school, and that was a really rough time. That's a hard age too. So I know as a teenager, like going into a new unfamiliar environment can be really hard. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, my schools were really similar. Yeah. I think that was something maybe you didn't really realize or know until you had gotten into the first school, and you're like, this is not the type of environment that you necessarily want to be in. And it's kind of a process of figuring out, as we've talked about, learning our kids too, like where do you thrive, the best. And they spend a lot of their time at school. It's so important. Again, I think people are just like, what's the big deal? Just like put them in school. This is where they spend like the majority of their time every single day. And it's really important, especially when you're going through something like a removal or a move in foster care. Oh my gosh. So important to be somewhere where you're comfortable. And
they need the extra support. Like they need teachers that they trust and teachers and administration that they can connect with. That's like, again, we're creating a safe place for this child to feel comfortable. And so if they don't have that, it's hard enough with your peers, but if you don't have that even with like your teachers and things like that, that's really hard. And I think that that's something that May experienced was like, these teachers are just overwhelmed in general, so like they're not going to really pay me much attention. And so, I think that it's funny because she actually wanted to go to that school. She had heard good things about that school. And so it was a learning experience for all of us of like, okay, maybe not.
Yeah, and it often is, again, for me too, and all the things that we ended up kind of going through, I think, that was difficult, but that's, a lot of that was on maybe the behavioral side, the comfortability side, because I know my kiddo that was struggling with that felt very much similarly like this is an environment where I feel like I belong. This isn't somewhere where I feel like people care about me or are invested in me, and I can tell, and so I'm acting out because of that. So a lot of that was like social and emotional needs not really being met. But then there's a whole nother side, obviously, to education, probably the bigger side, which is the academic side as well. And my other kiddo, when they came to me, was really behind academically. And so whenever I was choosing a school, I actually had both of my kiddos already. So I was kind of at a crossroads where I was like, this is the year where I need to find a school that will meet both of their needs and try to stick with it for as long as we can for consistency's sake. I didn't know if I was adopting them at this point, but I was like, whatever decision I make, I want to make it so that the person that maybe even comes behind me after me at least has a chance of giving them some consistency. And so academically as well, when you're school shopping, that's something that you're looking for. I know May has certain interests and things that she wanted to study and wanted to do, and I know that academics is a big part of making that decision, of course.
For sure.
But
especially when you're going into like college,
absolutely,
from high school, like that is even more so a consideration. What the school focuses on.
Absolutely. So, it's meeting all of their needs, and sometimes it's hard to find that. You're like, oh, well, this school might meet their academic needs or social needs, but maybe not their academic. It's kind of like a weighted balancing act. But at one point you mentioned private school. we had looked at a school that was faith-based, and we're Christians, we're believers. And so I was like, oh, maybe this would be like a school where they really care about foster care and adoption. And we're like, nope, we're not equipped to handle that type of behavior. And I was like, oh. And so where maybe they would have met their spiritual needs, maybe they would have met their academic needs, they wouldn't necessarily have met their behavioral needs.
Right.
They were very honest about that. So like, good for them. But it was a little bit of a shock to me, because I was like, oh man, like even these schools that I would expect,
Right.
to have these things kind of worked out or mapped out, didn't. And it was because I started knowing the right questions to ask too. I would call and I would inquire, and I'd be like, okay, what kind of system do you have for behavioral issues? What's your chain of command? How does that work? What's your 5-step, or whatever disciplinary program? Like, I want to know about your disciplinary program. And a lot of schools couldn't even tell me what their, like,
They're like, we just go as we go.
yeah, they're just like, oh, we just kind of call the parent and then suspend them. I'm like, that's not what we're trying to do.
No.
We've done enough of that. And so I think it was definitely a journey. But all these schools may meet different needs. And so for us, it was about finding one that I felt like could meet all of those the best that they can, or that we're at least trying.
Yeah, and there's still things about the school that we're at now that didn't completely fulfill all those needs, but the important ones were met. And I think that is hard to make that decision, because like the school that we attend is like has maybe fewer extracurricular things, and not that the ones that they have are bad, like they're good, and it's great programs, but overall I think it was like, okay, this is going to meet emotional, social needs, and then also education as much as we can.
Yeah.
And that's hard. It's hard to make a decision as far as that goes, because there may be other things at other schools that you're like, well, their sports is really great over here.
Yeah.
But I think it's a hard decision to make overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, the current school that we're at now, which we're both, again, ironically at different campuses, because my kids are little and your kid is older. I hate to say big, older.
He's a big kid.
We are in the same district, and, we've still continued to encounter some of the things we were encountering in the last district. It's just that they're more equipped and able to handle. They have a very lengthy process when it comes to discipline. I feel like they have a very effective behavioral process, which was a big reason why I chose them in the first place. But whenever I sat down with one of the deans at the end of last year, something that he said to me was that our district is going to start doing trauma-informed training because of families like you. And like, we want to be able to serve this community.
It's so good.
Listen, if I wasn't sold on the school before, I was sold after that. And it made everything that we've gone through before, because I had sat and had endless meetings with them about what we had gone through before, what I felt like worked, what I felt like didn't work. And they cared enough to even sit there and listen to me.
Right.
Time after time, talk about my kids' needs. And when behavioral things would come up and I'd end up in the dean's office, we'd sit down and we'd talk. And so, the director, he was telling me like, this is something that we want to do for families like yours and other families in our district. We see the need and we want to meet it. Oh my gosh, game changer.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage you, if you're an educator listening, like, take some notes. Right. And I'm not saying our school is perfect either. And there's some things that I don't know that will stay all the way through high school. I'm not sure. But I know right now where we're at, I feel like they are putting forth the effort. And that's because of our hard work too. My caseworker, our attorney, the state board, all the people that I've sat in front of and said, hey, we need to make school a comfortable, safe learning environment for kids like mine. Oh my gosh, to hear him say that was like the reward that I needed after advocating my butt off, to be honest.
For sure. Yeah, I think that something that we experienced was like the structure and the rules were a little bit stricter. And not that May necessarily needs that, but I think as far as the environment and the kids around her, like the other school, it was just like chaos all the time because nobody cared and nobody did anything disciplinary, you know?
Yeah.
And I think now it's like, sometimes it's like almost to the point where maybe she's annoyed about it, but like, I'd much rather that where the administrators care about what's going on and, you know, are going to take action. And it's not perfect all the time. Sometimes it's like maybe not as much as we hope, but most of the time it's like, thankfully they care enough to have that structure and uphold it.
Yeah, and in our trauma informed episode, we talked about that specifically. Kids, especially who have experienced trauma, need so much structure to their life, a good routine. They know what to expect. They have a schedule. It's not like people are making emotional decisions or letting it, like you said, get to chaos. It's really important. So if you're looking at schools or you're not sure what to do, or maybe your kid's really struggling, I would ask some really hard questions of your district, of your team that you're working with. I will say something that I learned along the way, and this may help somebody, I'm not sure. In Arkansas, there is an academic coordinator or somebody who works for the State Board of Education whose job it is to work with foster families specifically.
Oh, right. Like at each school, they should. Oh, well, that's what our experience was at each school. There's a foster care and homeless advocate.
Yeah.
And so they work with basically DHS and do things like that.
I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe some semantics are wrong with me trying to explain it, but
maybe. Well, and I'm sure with every school or district, it's a little bit different how it works.
Yeah. So there is an advocate, and I would say if I know that's true for the state of Arkansas. I would say look at your state. I didn't even know that existed until I talked to our attorney, and she was like, "Hey, there's a lady whose job this is actually to make sure that your kids are successful in school and they stay in school and they thrive in school." And so, having that connection and that person working for us as well, couldn't have asked for a better connection. But make sure you're the squeaky wheel a little bit. I say that all the time. That old saying, squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Oh my gosh. Can I tell a little story?
Yeah, sure.
When we were trying to get Maymay into school initially, we had a couple hurdles to go through. Obviously, we were trying to get her into a school that was outside of district, but because of her situation and also because of Arkansas's law, it's what's it called? Arkansas Learns Act.
The Learns Act. Mm-hmm.
You get to choose where you want to go to school, and you can have special permission to leave the district that you're zoned for. And so, basically, we had to be the squeaky wheel because, again, her caseworker was on leave, and so we were working with other people in the office. They were great to work with. It wasn't necessarily on them. It's just
the circumstances.
The circumstances were not good. So Maymay was literally out of school for I think it was almost 3 weeks. It was a long time.
Yeah.
And we had to contact her attorney ad litem and contact all these different people in the school district to try to get her into the school that we wanted her to go to, because the one we were zoned for, honestly, not that great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. And she actually went there for one day because we were like, maybe we should just put her there just until we can get the green light for this other school. She literally went for one day, and it was probably the worst experience. She's like, these kids are crazy. But it was a long process, and we definitely had to be the squeaky wheel because, there for a little bit, nobody was getting back to us. And eventually we did talk to some people that were like, she hasn't been in school for 2 weeks. What's going on? Why are they taking their time? Because again, since she's in foster care, she should be able to have these things happen very quickly. And so thankfully we did talk to the right people, but it took calling so many people. And
you guys are beating down the doors for weeks at a time, every single day.
And it was hard because that first week we thought, like you had said, we thought that the office, the DHS office we were with, were going to be handling these things. And they were to an extent. But once it got to making certain phone calls, that wasn't necessarily what they were going to handle. And they didn't necessarily tell us that. So we're like, I guess we just have to take things in our own hands and make these decisions. And so thankfully we had the freedom to do that. But we had to kind of come to that realization on our own.
Yeah, they've given us a lot of autonomy when it comes to choosing schools and things like that. And I think, again, like my whole thought process was like, advocate my butt off, get to a place where, you know, I feel like there's longevity. Mm-hmm. And those are like my two main goals because I want them to stay in school and to thrive in school. My kids are also very young. They don't just have a year to buy out their time and then be done. Right. Like my kids have lots of years of school left. And so it's really important when you're making those decisions. They do give you a lot of freedom to make those. And sometimes that can be intimidating, especially if you're a first-time parent like us. Like, oh my gosh, now I know what to do. But then it was definitely really hard, but I know their academic success is also so important to their next chapter.
For sure.
I think especially, you know, when we're talking about May, she's, you know, about to age out of foster care. We've talked about that. Her future plans are maybe here or there, like not really quite sure yet, but it's going to be so important for her.
Right.
In just a year, she's going to enter adulthood.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, she does have aspirations to go to college and do things like that. So, I mean, she does great in school, but again, her environment's going to make or break that whole experience and whether she's going to thrive. You know, it's like, okay, it's one thing if you like make decent grades, but like if you're not thriving, then it's hard.
Absolutely.
Hard to enjoy that stage of your life. And so, yeah, thankfully we've landed at a good place.
Yeah. And not just for, you know, foster families in our community, but in our community in general and the population that we live in and work in. Like, it's very common for people to be well below grade level, well below education level, to not get any higher education, if even a high school diploma. There's a lot of literacy issues in our community and things like that. And so, you know, I think for me too, I'm like, my kids could easily become a part of a statistic in our community. And I won't allow them to. And even this year, you know, we've come leaps and bounds behaviorally in school because of the environment we're in. I think it has a lot to do with the consistency and the structure, like you mentioned. But also academically, we're still struggling a little bit. We're still catching up in some areas. And so, you know, it's still taking work every single day. And I know there are parents all over the place, foster care, adoptive or not. School is just a hard thing to walk your kids through. I think most kids usually have some type of hurdle in school, one way or another, 1 year or another. Maybe they get a teacher they're not clicking with as much, or maybe they're not making friends like you thought they would, or maybe academically they're behind and somewhere their need isn't being met. I would just encourage you to keep going, to keep advocating. And that work really never stops. That's just part of parenting. We're dealing with maybe your average setbacks or hurdles in school. And but the advocacy really never stops when it comes to your kids.
Yeah, I think too, it's important to have grace for yourself. For me, I was homeschooled literally my entire childhood growing up all through school. So I didn't really know about the school system in a lot of ways. So I had to force myself to learn these things and to ask a lot of questions. So that was a very new experience for me. And I think too, again, being parents for the first time, you know, you're not like learning your child as they grow up. You're getting them in a moment and you're having to make these decisions pretty quickly. Obviously, there's grace to like make changes along the way. But I think you have to remember that it's going to be a process. It's not going to be an immediate good decision. If that happens for you, that's amazing. But most likely it won't.
Yeah. And as you're learning it, maybe we can impart some wisdom into you. We've talked about it through the episode, but I think some things that, you know, we would do is, if we could do it again, or if we knew more at the time, would be to, you know, make sure that you're really honest with your school. Make sure you give them a full picture of your kiddos and maybe what they've gone through and what they're dealing with, either behaviorally, socially, emotionally, spiritually, academically. Maybe they need to catch up. Maybe they've had trouble making friends. Like all of those things, the school needs to know to be able to serve. They need to know the need in order to meet the need. And then in turn, asking them, how can you help us meet those needs? If we have a behavioral situation, how are you going to deal with that? Like I was talking about earlier. If we have a situation with an emotional need, maybe we're having a breakdown or something is going on with us, what kind of counseling do you have in place? Academically, what kind of resources do you have to help my child catch up in this way or make sure they don't fall behind just in the move of everything? And what behaviors are you guys noticing? If you decide on a school, you can routinely ask, what kind of behaviors are you guys noticing from them?
Right.
Do they seem drawn back? Do they seem to be having, symptoms of anxiety and depression at school that maybe I'm not seeing at home? Again, and they spend so much of their time at school. Not only can you give them a full picture and regularly do that, but you want to count on the school to help you do that too. And if they're a good school, if they care about their students, hopefully they will, if you ask, and they'll help you work as a team.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing, that I learned through this process was, hey, how can me, my caseworker, our attorney, the state board, our school district, the administration, all work together for a child's success? Like that's really what it's all about. And I think if I could also impart wisdom into educators, it would be to join that team with us. Maybe you think you don't have a place to serve in foster care and adoption as a full-time parent or anything like that. If you're an educator, I promise you, there is a space for you to make a huge difference for these kids. And it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of care, compassion, maybe a little bit more work on your end. We've had amazing teachers who have really stepped up for us and said, hey, we're going to try this, we're going to do this and do that to ensure that this child is successful and feels safe and comfortable in school. And beyond that, grows in learning and in thriving in social settings and things like that. So if you're an educator, just know you're going to make a difference. I have to brag on our teachers. I know you've had some good experiences as well.
Yeah, and I think that this whole process, yes, it's been a process and there's been hurdles, but ultimately we're so thankful for everyone that's been helpful, all the educators, all the administrators that have helped us, because that's like it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
It's not just on us as the parents, it's on the educators and administrators as well. And I think that I'm so thankful for the people that we've come in contact with because they've been so helpful and have advocated for our kids just as much as we want to advocate for them.
Hopefully you learned something from our experiences today, whether that be something that you will do, maybe something that you won't do. Like we said, it's a whole learning process and you have to have grace for yourself in this area. Even if you don't know a whole lot about education, maybe you're becoming a foster parent and this is helpful to you, or you're in the thick of it and you just need some encouragement. Man, can we just say, keep going. It's going to be worth it. Keep advocating for your kids. Their education is so important. If you're an educator, thank you for all the work you do. Keep working to help these kids with us too. We're on the same team. And if you have any questions or you want to keep talking around the topic of education, we want to keep encouraging you. Well, hope that helps.
Wait, don't leave yet. We have some really exciting news. We're going to be releasing some bonus content really, really soon.
Whoop, whoop.
This is going to be content that you can pay a little bit extra just for a little something extra every week. We're going to be releasing a new episode. And in the next couple episodes, we'll give a little sneak peek at what we're going to be doing. Super excited about that. So keep your eye out for that.
Yeah, and you can, in the meantime, follow us on social media where we'll give you some updates at Hope That Helps Pod. That's on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And then if you want to email us or talk to us, you can send us an email at hopethathelpspodcast@gmail.com. Another cool feature we have is listener support on Spotify, and that is a donation-based service that you can donate to us through to keep the podcast going. We want to make sure that we're getting it out, and we have a really busy schedule as moms and full-time employees. We do this on the side completely for free, but we do have a team that we would love to help support in that way. And so if you want to donate to us there, that's great. And then you will have another opportunity to subscribe to bonus content as well.
And if you like what you're hearing, please go give us a 5-star review. That would be super helpful to get the podcast out to more people, just so that more people can hear this content, learn, and be a part of this community. Also, we want to give a shout out to our production team, Eric Pardo and Zach Grimes. We're so thankful for y'all.
Well, nope.
Bye.